Warwick Castle stands above the River Avon like a monument to power. For more than 1,000 years, its towers have watched wars, executions, celebrations, and betrayals pass beneath them. To most visitors, the castle is a symbol of medieval strength, a place of history, a place of stone and legend. But far below the great halls and battlements, beneath the laughter of tourists and the echo of modern footsteps, there is another Warwick Castle. One without windows, without time, without silence. This is the dungeon. Built not for justice, but for fear, the dungeon was designed to break people, not only their bodies, but their minds. Prisoners were lowered into darkness where light never reached, where stone walls pressed in close, and where screams were swallowed before they could ever escape. Some prisoners never left, and according to countless reports, some never stopped being there. Visitors who descend into Warwick Castle's dungeons often describe an immediate change. The air becomes heavier, colder. Breathing feels noticed. The stone walls are ancient and uneven, worn smooth by centuries of human contact, hands scraping for balance, bodies dragged across the floor, faces pressed into damp rock in panic and prayer. Guides will tell you this is just history, but visitors say the walls don't feel dead. They feel alert. The first reports are always subtle, a sense of movement in the corner of the eye, a shadow that shifts when no one moves, a strange pressure, as if the space itself is leaning closer. Then come the faces. Tourists have reported seeing human features forming briefly in the stone, eyes opening where there were none before, mouths stretching, expressions frozen in terror or rage. Blink, and they're gone. Photographs taken inside the dungeon sometimes reveal shapes that weren't noticed at the time. Faces half-formed, hollow eyes embedded in the walls, shadows that do not match any visible light source. No two images are the same, but the expressions always are. Fear, pain, awareness. Sound behaves strangely inside Warwick's dungeon. Footsteps echo longer than they should. Whispers seem to come from behind, even when the corridor is empty. And sometimes, visitors report something far more disturbing. Breathing. Not their own. Slow. Close. Right at ear level. People turn, expecting to see another visitor standing behind them. There is never anyone there. Yet the breathing continues. Until it doesn't. Staff members rarely speak about these experiences publicly, but privately, many admit the dungeon is different after closing hours. Lights flicker without electrical cause. Security cameras briefly lose signal, only in the lower chambers. Motion sensors trigger when nothing is visible. One guard described walking through the dungeon late at night and feeling the walls respond to him, as if something inside them was tracking his movement. Another refused to patrol alone after hearing what sounded like fingernails dragging slowly across stone. The sound followed him. Historians believe the dungeon walls absorbed more than moisture and age. During medieval times, prisoners were often left in darkness for months or years. Some died from illness, some from starvation, some from madness. Screams were common. Begging was ignored. And in those final moments, when hope collapsed and panic peaked, many prisoners pressed themselves against the stone, clawing, crying, whispering promises to anyone who might be listening. There was no one, except the walls. Modern paranormal researchers suggest a disturbing possibility, that intense human suffering can imprint itself on physical spaces, that stone subjected to centuries of fear might retain memory, not as thought, but as reaction, a living record. A wall that remembers faces, a corridor that replays breath, a dungeon that responds when it senses the living. Visitors report shadows that don't simply move, but react. Step closer, and the shadow pulls back. Pause, and it waits. Turn away, and it follows. Always just beyond certainty. Some guests leave early. Others feel dizzy, nauseous, disoriented. A few describe an overwhelming urge to get out, as if the dungeon itself wants them gone, or wants them to stay. Children are often the most affected. Several have pointed at the walls and asked who the people are. There is nothing there. At least, nothing adults can see. The most unsettling reports come from those who stand completely still, in silence, when no one speaks. That's when the dungeon seems to breathe. A subtle expansion of sound, a pressure shift in the air, a sense of being surrounded, not by space, but by presence. Not ghosts in chains, not figures walking corridors. Something worse. People who never left the walls. Warwick Castle remains open. The dungeon remains a popular attraction. No official records confirm anything unusual, but the stories continue. Faces seen, breathing heard, shadows that respond, and a feeling shared by nearly everyone who descends below. That the dungeon is not empty. It is occupied. And it is watching.